Welcome to My Bookcase Slays. This is a podcast where we discuss killer books. I'm your host, Melissa Westemeyer, and I'm really excited to be talking today with Martha Waters, author of a new mystery titled And Then There Was the One. Uh, Welcome, Martha.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Martha, when I started reading this book, right out of the gate, I was like, "Wait, what?" Because I guess when I started reading it, the Agatha Christie-ish title made me think it was a murder mystery, but then the voice was just not typical for a murder mystery, and I was captivated. And then I did my recon on you, and I realized like this is your first murder mystery, but you've got a very storied career in another genre. So, tell listeners about that, please.
Yeah, so this is my first mystery, but because my background is actually writing romance, which I would argue this is both a mystery and a romance. So I think that anyone who comes into this confused will not be surprised very early on to realize that I'm a romance writer. My first series was a five book like Regency historical series, and then I kind of did a pivot and wrote a contemporary Christmas book, and this is yet another pivot. I think I'm just really interested in playing with the idea of genre and everything and sort of like poking fun at the tropes and just, I don't know, I love reading mysteries. And so when I finished my first historical series, I knew I wanted to continue writing historical romance, but try something different and getting to combine two genres that I really, really love and probably the two genres that I read the most, was just like such a fun challenge as a writer. Yeah, and I don't know, it's probably the book of mine that I'm like the most excited about and proud of anything that I've written. So
That's so cool. Yeah, there's a lot of humor. Like right away, I'm like, oh, I see what she's doing here. It was fun for readers to understand. This really follows in the vein of your Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers type of murder mystery. Takes place in a small village. Let's talk for a minute about your names of your places and your characters. What a riot!
Oh, thank you. Every time someone compliments me on it, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad because I was laughing to myself when I was naming everything. Because yeah, the village is called Bunkum upon Woolly. Naming all the little businesses in the village, I really wanted to create the most like stereotypical sort of cozy English murder village I could imagine. Part of the whole joke of the book was sort of contrasting, oh, the coziness with the fact that people are dropping dead, because that's like a weird thing about the genre if you think about it too hard. And I kind of wanted to play with that. But yeah,
Completely.
coming up with the names was definitely a big part of the fun.
Everything was like sheep themed. Even the two pubs in town had like competing sheep names, and then one town over, it's all about cheese, which was
Yes.
pretty
The,
great.
the, fi-
Yeah,
the finest things in life, sheep and cheese, obviously.
very British too. I gotta hand it to you. So even though it's funny and you're definitely like poking fun at the conventions and the tropes, I could tell reading this you have a ton of respect for mysteries because the tone is light and humorous, but there's intelligence underneath. It's not just a silly story. Like there's a lot of intelligence packed into this story. Talk a little bit about your background as a mystery fan and how you brought that into here. And I want to hear you talk specifically about did you read Dorothy Sayers and Agatha Christie? Because they pop up quite a bit.
Yeah, it's so funny because I always say that like the way I became a romance reader and eventually a romance writer was because I liked genre fiction and I realized that all like my favorite fantasies and mysteries were the ones that had romance in them. So this very much feels like coming back to sort of honor a genre that like I really, really value and love and respect. And yeah, it's so interesting because I really wanted to both, yeah, poke fun at the tropes while also still adhering to them because I wanted it to be a satisfying mystery in addition to a romance. And it's kind of tricky to straddle that line. But what I really love about genre fiction in general, and the thing that I think people who don't read a lot of genre fiction sort of, they think that the predictability of the beats of the genre make it boring or just like not that literary or whatever. Whereas I feel like so many of the authors that I most admire are the ones that I see working within like the established structure of a genre and really making it their own and putting their own spin on it, which is really what I wanted to do. And so I knew when I came into this that I wanted to really pay respect to the real classics of the genre, like Sayers and Christie, which were definitely some of the first mystery authors that I can remember reading. And I love Sayers in particular because I love the romance between Whimsy and Harriet Vane in her books. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. I would love to write something that feels even like a little bit, that makes the reader even a little bit as invested in the romance as well as the mystery as she did with those ones. I will say that I'm like a wimp also, so I get scared very easily. So I definitely wanted to keep the tone sort of light and silly. Like one of my strongest early mystery reading memories is reading Murder on the Orient Express when I was in college, and my roommate was out of town for the weekend, and I was reading it late at night alone. And I'm like, I don't think of Christie as being that scary, but I was absolutely terrified. So, definitely a strong interest in keeping this much more on the lighter and sillier side. And yeah, just sort of diving into all those tropes that are like the reason we read mysteries because we love them so much. And it was so much fun to get to play with two different genres and the tropes of both genres and kind of figure out how to balance them and make the book into something that sort of felt like its own thing, I guess.
The banter between Georgie and Fletcher Ford was fantastic.
Thank
Just
you.
it was chef's kiss, man. You know right away you're in Georgie's head and you see she's aware, right? Like she's intelligent and like, oh, I'm that girl who doesn't like to dress up and go places. But then she's telling herself, wait, you're wanting to dress up and do the things. What's going on here? Like this awareness of it. So you're bringing up the stereotypes, but then you're also making the characters are in on the joke, which I think gave this book its intelligence. And as a reader, if you're like, wait a minute, is she poking fun at this? No, you're not, because the characters know the game too, right? And they're talking about these. But then the interaction, the interplay between her and this, this guy comes into town, the way you describe him, it was rich. It was funny. So talk about what inspired these two characters in your mind.
And this is a really interesting case of where I kind of had the like idea for the book before the characters. And so I
Okay?
really deliberately about crafting characters that I thought would serve the needs of the story. And so the inspiration for this was just that I wanted to write a book about sort of a murder village. Like how many people can drop dead in one scenic village before it becomes weird? Like, isn't that strange? And so to do that, I was like, okay, I need to have a heroine who's an amateur sleuth. And so I started thinking about like what kind of personality would be drawn to that, like what type of person would get reluctantly sucked into solving all of these mysteries in her quaint village. And it makes sense to me that it would be someone, some sort of standing in the village, which Georgie's the daughter of like the local landed gentry that has lost most of its money, but they're still very respected. I figured personality wise, she'd just be very smart, but also very sensible and no nonsense and sort of exasperated about the fact that she keeps having to solve mysteries because the police aren't that good at it. And so then I knew for the romantic aspect, I wanted her acting partner to also be her like romantic lead. I really wanted it to be a very opposite personality type and potentially one that would create some friction in introducing him. And so I was like, what's the opposite for this? And I was like, what if I just bring in this sort of like posh playboy from London who's very like from this very fancy family and just wears a lot of like very nice clothes and seems to know absolutely nothing about the countryside, nothing about what he's doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, just kind of like playing that opposites attract off each other, which also I love writing banter. And I do think that when you have characters with really opposite personality types, it lends itself particularly well to banter. So that was definitely a motivation as well.
Which scene did you write first for this book? Because I know the first scene is not always the first scene that gets written on the back end of things.
Some of my previous books that have gotten like chopped up a bit more. There was some surgery that happened like later on in the book with moving things, like several chapters. When I was reviewing page proofs, I was like, oh yeah, this is where this ended up being. But the early scene, like the beginning chapter, I think has changed very little from my initial draft of it. And I think the opening line, I don't think has changed once since I wrote like the proposal for my agent to send my editor. Yeah, that first chapter, it has only very lightly been edited, so it's basically the same as it was like 2 years ago when I first started working on this.
It's impressive. What surprised you while you were writing this book in the process of writing a mystery after so much Regency romance rom-com?
I feel like rom-com's one of those words that gets like overused to be meaningless, but I definitely firmly identify my sort of style as very rom-com-y. I was so worried going in about, I was like, okay, I need to, obviously being a mystery, I need to know who did it going into it, and I need to figure out how I'm going to spool that out and what clues to drop and everything. The thing I didn't think about in advance that ended up being challenging, my editor helped me a lot with it, was figuring out, since it is really a equal parts romance and mystery, trying to balance the beats of two genres is really tricky because there are expected beats for each one and they're at different points in the book. And so that's why I think the back half of the book ended up getting moved around a bunch. Like certain scenes were moved, like key points in the romance were moved around to make sure they weren't like chopping up developments in the mystery too much. And that I think was the trickiest bit. It makes me really want to try doing another genre mashup like this in the future because I have ideas about how to do it better next time. I think I've learned from this experience. But yeah, that was unexpectedly tricky. And even though it's like once I was struggling with it, I was like, oh, of course I'm struggling with it. I'm trying to write two books at once.
You definitely are, and that it is true that especially in cozy fiction, the romance simmers
Mhm.
much longer across the trajectory of a series, but you're honoring that audience for romance. And so you have to deliver something. You can't just like let everybody go, ooh, will they, won't they, for,
Yeah.
five installations, right? So I can see where that pacing was a challenge because you want things and they don't always like rise, rise in the same way.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a point where late in the edits, my editor pointed out that I had like a big romantic development happening right as they're figuring out like all the like key bits of the mystery, and she was like, "I know you're trying to keep the things like balanced, and that's why you have this here." But she's like, "Honestly, I think you'd be better just wrapping up the mystery here, and then having the end of the book be more of the romance like getting wrapped up because she's like, you balance it pretty well like throughout up till now, but at a certain point, it's like you take away all the tension if it's like, and then." And now we're going to talk about our feelings. Like
Yeah,
it made for like an odd read, so there was definitely some fiddling to be done there.
I think you managed to balance it really, really well. And I have to say, I did not know until the end who done it, and the revelations just, you can't guess. So
I had the problem where I keep wanting to tell people the solution to the mystery because to me, part of the fun of the book is the solution. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, you're not allowed to do that with mysteries. You can't just, it's not like romance where, yes, there's a happy ending. And obviously in the mystery, there's all the crime, but I keep wanting to be like, oh, and part of the joke is, and then I'm like,
yes,
oh, nope, can't do this.
can't do that. No, but I thought it was very well developed. It's a great mystery plot for sure. The romance part was good, but the mystery was equally strong and compelling. And I like how you set up Georgie's character I felt like I was in mid series because there was this reference back to, oh, she's also done this and she's helped with this. So she has this established role as an amateur sleuth, or the book even opens. That was different for me as a reader, and I liked it.
I knew coming into this, it was like a one book joke essentially. But I was like, I don't think I don't want to like spin this out into a series. And also, I just come off a series, so I knew I didn't want to write a series anyways. But then I was like, okay, if I need her to already be well into her detecting career, sort of, for the whole setup here to work, I don't know, it's an interesting challenge because usually in a detective series, it's just like, well, you've read the previous books, or maybe you haven't, but it doesn't really matter as much. They were really focused on this one case, whereas I felt like I needed to draw in some of the previous information in a way that didn't feel too weird and info dumpy. And I was like, oh, this is a strange like predicament to have in a mystery novel where you're trying to create a character who would be a series lead, but not write the rest of the series. It was an odd predicament.
So you're answering one of my questions. There is not a sequel in the works.
No, I really had a specific vision for this book of sort of just throwing everything into it, everything that I love about mysteries and delivering a satisfying romance at the same time. I have ideas for other romance mystery hybrids, but not
Okay.
with these characters necessarily. So hopefully there'll be future mysteries from me, but I'm just gonna let Georgie and Sebastian live in peace now.
Okay. I'm a little disappointed, not gonna
I know.
lie.
When I finished the book, I was like, oh, I would happily write like four books about them because I find them so fun together and their dynamic so fun. So I guess I should say never. And if this book does like crazy well, then who knows? But as of right now, I'm going to leave them be and let them live their life in peace without corpses everywhere.
Unless they travel, maybe no one else there should. They could follow. They could go to visit Arthur in London and
I
have like
know.
a madcap adventure there.
Well, one of the problems also is it's set in 1934, and I had the thing where I was like, oh, we are rapidly approaching a major global conflict, and I don't really want to think about them having to like be involved in World War II. And I started like writing fanfic of my own book in my own head, where I was like, maybe they'll both do work for the government or something that's like cool and espionage, but does not involve them, being killed in the war. I don't know. That is a problem with writing. I feel like fiction set at this time is if you go too far forward, it's like, oh, there's a world war.
Yeah, it is a tricky time period to plant yourself in for sure.
And I had a reader already flag that. She sent me a message. She'd read it in an early copy, and she was like, I'm just reassuring myself that they're both going to be fine in the war. And I was like, don't worry, they are, because I'm the author and I've decided that they're going to be fine. Then everyone you meet in this book will survive the war, because that's the only way I could like deal with writing it is just to preemptively state all these people will survive World War II.
Oh, it makes me sad to even think about that. The
I know.
possibility of them having to live through that. No, they need to stay just planted in time, like
Right.
suspended in amber, just
Yeah,
flowing
exactly.
beautifully in this perfect moment in the English countryside. Did you have a particular audience in mind as you were writing this book?
I really was hoping it would have cross-genre appeal. That was actually a big part of the discussion when we were coming with the cover art. We really want people who read historical romance, but also maybe contemporary romance because I think the voice in my books tends to feel pretty contemporary.
I
So
agree.
drawn with those readerships, but also people who love mysteries, especially people who love classic golden age fiction, to love this book too. And I dedicated it to one of my friends who maybe has the most similar reading taste to me of anyone I know. And she just reads a lot of classic golden age crime and a lot of historical romance. And I was like, that is my ideal reader right there.
Okay. But I think especially your romance readers will slide into mystery, don't you think?
I think there's a lot of crossover between those two readerships in general. I mean, I read a lot of both, and a lot of my friends read pretty widely in both genres. So that was kind of my thinking. I feel like these two genres are already natural friends just because I think a lot of readers read in both. And there are so many really good mystery series that have really lovely romantic subplots that I know a lot of romance readers really love, even if they are much slower burning than the one in this book was, because you have to wait like 8 books in a series for them to get together, which I'm always like, Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I think hopefully that there should be a lot for readers of both genres here.
It's a fun little treat. So what is on your bookshelf right now that you're reading?
I have an advanced copy of Revenge Served Royal. It's the third book in Celeste Connolly's Lady Petra series, which is like a Regency era mystery series that also has a romantic subplot. I really love this series. They're like really great, super satisfying mysteries with a lot of fun historical detail, but they are just like that ever so slightly cheeky in a way that I find very charming and fun. So I'm reading that at the moment and really, really enjoying it. And then next on the docket is something completely different, which is called The Geo Magician. It's another one that's not out yet. It's coming out in the spring, and it's a debut historical fantasy about dinosaurs and magic and like academia and in like the Victorian era. But I think there's also a romance. So I'm really excited about reading that one next.
That does sound like it's going to give you ideas for a future project, maybe.
I'm here for all the genre mashups, clearly. So I'm like, yes, more of this, please.
That's great. So what's on tap for you next after this book comes out?
I'm literally waiting. Like, I just got an email from my editor about an hour ago that she is sending over my edit letter for next year's book this week. Trying not to spiral and panic about that. Can't talk about it yet because we haven't announced it, but I will say that it is another romance mashed up with another genre. So I'm clearly just going down
Cool.
this road. Whether or not it's a good idea, we'll see. And yeah, it's definitely another one that has a pretty strong comedic element, like all of my work does. So I think it's one that hopefully readers of my previous books will enjoy, even if it's a different genre being mashed up this time with the romance. So I'm
I
looking forward to being able to talk about it soon once I actually finish writing it.
you make me think a little bit of Saturday Night Live. You know how that show mashes up current events and comedy tropes and
Mhm.
is always doing social commentary. Your books are sort of becoming like that, maybe, where you are like an SNL writer, mashing up the comedy and the the tropes and the.
I mean, obviously, I'm not going to complain about that comparison because it's very flattering. But yeah, I think the comedy is really the strong like trend running through all of my work, I think. And it's really hard for me to imagine ever writing a book that doesn't have a pretty strong comedic element to it. And I'm just sort of having fun because I don't know, I read pretty widely and I love a lot of different genres. And so I'm really having a good time spreading my wings beyond like traditional historical romance and trying to play around with the tropes and the comedic potential of other genres and subgenres. So long as my publisher keeps letting me do that, like I'm gonna keep doing it because it's fun.
That's fantastic. If the next book is anything as expertly constructed as this one, I know your readers are going to love it. I'm going to ask you a couple fun questions. What is the coolest object in your workspace right now?
This might be a very loose use of the word cool. I would like to show like my sheep bobblehead that my editor gave me because there's sheep jokes in like all of my books, and then this one obviously really goes hardcore on the sheep, and so she got me a sheep bobblehead that now sits at my desk.
That's so fitting. That's
I
so
know.
perfect.
And
No, that is cool.
it was before she'd even read a draft of this book. I was working on it or about to start working on it at the time. Like she'd read the proposal for it, but I was like, you truly don't understand how fitting this is for the work I'm about to start.
Yeah, I can picture you just working away in the sheep. It's just up there going, bah, yeah,
Just nodding his little head at me.
approving of every scene, every sentence. That's one. What is a question that your family and friends keep asking you after they've read this book? Like, what is the the thing that they keep coming back to.
Honestly, I feel like there have been fewer questions about this one because all my family and friends after my previous Regency series, they were constantly having to ask me what random Regency words were because they don't read a lot of historical
Oh,
romance. So things that would be
okay.
very familiar to a reader or a historical romance reader that you wouldn't even bother to explain because you would just assume the knowledge. They were all coming to it as like newbie historical romance readers and being like, "What the barouche? What is this weird hat they're wearing?" Like, da da da. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, can you guys please use Google?" So I feel like with this one, there have been fewer questions other than them asking, "Why is your editor continuing to allow you to write so many sheep jokes into your books?" Which I'm like, because my editor is lovely.
I think your editor obviously gets you and knows that your readers are going to get you too, and that is just fine. And puns are huge with cozies, so
Yeah.
pressing right into that as well.
Yep.
So very satisfying. All right, so they're not a little disappointed that there's no more of these two.
I've had a couple of friends complain about it. They're like, this isn't a series opener," and I was like, "No."
I totally thought it was. That's so
I know.
funny.
I will say, I sometimes when I finish a book, I'm like, I'm definitely never gonna write about these people ever again. And I feel like sad because I miss the characters, but I feel very like closure. But with this one, I was like, I don't have any plans to write about them again. But I don't know. I'd love to find a way to like work them in as like side characters somehow. Like
Oh,
I think they're sort of like a shared fictional universe or something because I just find them so delightful.
that would be cool. Yeah. Well, you do that final line is no, and most importantly of all, no one at all was being murdered. And because it's written in that active present tense voice,
Yeah.
no one's being murdered right
Right
now.
now.
So that's
Surely
maybe
people
that
will be murdered in the future.
that contributed maybe to my sense of, but yeah, just a fantastic book. So is there anything that you would like readers to know going in, like keep an eye out for?
I just hope everyone has fun with it. Like it's really meant to be fun. I feel like it's been a stressful year for a lot of people, and I'm just sort of hoping that everyone can read this and sort of escape from the real world for a few hours. It's technically a book about people being murdered, but I feel like it's about as much fun you can have while being a book about people being murdered. So
And it's not graphic, and it constantly delivers on the humor, and the voice is so strong.
thank you.
Yes. Well, Martha, thank you for sharing your time with us and listeners today to hear about your newest project, and wish you best of luck with what comes next. We'll all be waiting to find out what got mashed up with some romance in the in the next installation from you. Just a reminder, listeners, that My Bookcase Slays is a member of the Authors Radio Network.